Good morning, Eagles, and welcome to Mr. G's Art Studio. Today we're going to be learning how to use foreground, middle ground, and background to create beautiful landscapes. And why are we making landscapes? Well, this entire week we're going to be making Earth Day projects. Can you guess why? Yes, this Wednesday is Earth Day, and I know we celebrate Earth Day every day, but we specially celebrated this Wednesday. So let's make some beautiful art to celebrate Earth Day. For today's assignment, you will need a sheet of paper, a pencil, a marker if you have one, and a way to add color. It can be crayons or marker. Either way is fine. If you need time to get your materials ready, go ahead and pause the video now. In the past, some of you may have drawn your pictures where you add things on the edge of your paper. So let's say you're going to do a tree. Some of you may have in the past drawn the tree coming from the edge of your paper, or the house from the edge of your paper. Well, the edge of your paper is not the ground. There is another ground. Some of you may have drawn a ground and then drawn your objects and things on that ground, like this. But there's more grounds than just that one. We have more grounds. If you've been drawing like this, you've been drawing the foreground only. But we also have a middle ground and we have a background. So if I wanted to make a picture using foreground, middle ground, and background, I would have to draw 3 grounds. Now, can you look at the words foreground? Sounds like front. Middle ground. Can you guess where the middle ground is? If you said the middle, you're right. And background, can you guess where that one is? Of course, it's in the back. And we've always talked about your background in art class, right? Well, now we're going to have to remember we have a background, a middle ground, and a foreground. And even though foreground doesn't say front, I want you to remember that the F stands for front. When I draw things in the foreground, I want to make them large. When I draw things in the middle ground, if you said medium, you're right. And when I draw things in the background, I want to make them small. So it would be large, medium, and small. This creates the illusion of distance. This house and this tree is closer to me because it's in the foreground. This house and this tree is a little smaller because it's in the middle ground. And this house and this tree are small or tiny because they're in the background and they're far away. Now let's get started with our drawing. I have my sheet of paper ready, and you could draw with pencil, or you could draw with pen or a marker. I'm going to do it with a marker just so that you can see it better. To start off with, I'm going to start off with my foreground. So in my foreground, I'm going to do some flowers, and they're going to be ginormous, gigantic, because they're close to me. So they are in my foreground. So right here in my foreground, I'm going to do a curve, and that's going to be one of my flowers. And maybe I'm going to do another one over here, and then over here on the corner I'm going to do another one, and it's almost coming out of the page. So these are going to be my first flowers, and because they're very, very close to me. And I'm going to do my petals on my flowers. You can make the petals however you want. Remember from the last lesson, you can make the flowers however you want also. So here are some petals on my flowers because they're really close to me. So they're gigantic. They're in the foreground. And here's another flower. I'm going to add some petals on this one. I'm going to make the petals on this one a little shorter. And then this last one, maybe I'm going to make this one like a sunflower. Maybe I'm going to make the petals more like a triangle, kind of pointy. And if you remember from last lesson, we learned about overlapping. So I'm going to create another flower right here that's overlapping. So I'm going to go from this flower to this flower and create a flower that is overlapping. So if I'm doing the petals on this flower, I can just make them the regular way over here. But when I get to here to this flower, I have to stop. And that is because I'm overlapping. And right there, I have to stop. And maybe I'm going to do a smaller one right here. A smaller one. And we have them running out of the page to create the illusion that it continues outside the page. And here's another smaller one. See how I did that overlapping right there behind the sunflower petals? And I'm going to add some petals to that one right here. And you can make them all sunflowers if you want. It would be a beautiful field of sunflowers. Remember overlapping right there? It gets tricky when you overlap too much. But if you like overlapping, go ahead and do as much or as little as you want. So here's my flowers that are in the foreground. And if you want to create some texture on your flowers, you can do that as well. You could create some texture, remember from our lesson on hatching and cross hatching. You could create some patterns inside your flowers too. Get creative with them. I made a crisscross pattern in this one. You can even get more complex than that if you want to add circles inside. This reminds me of sunflowers when the seeds are all packed together really tightly. So you can make your patterns in your flowers however you want. If you did the square one flower, you remember how we just filled the whole thing with circles? And I will continue to finish that flower. And I made this flower with stripes. And I made this one with circles, almost like a rainbow. And I made this one with spirals. Remember, spirals go around and around. And I made this one with circles also, and I guess donuts, right? I like donuts. So this is my foreground. It's what's closest to me, so it's large. Now for my middle ground, I'm going to do some hills. So to make my hills, I'm going to make some rolling hills with some wavy lines. And you don't have to make them have a lot of bumps on them. Maybe 3 or 4 bumps on it. Just wavy lines. There is one wavy line. And I'm going to do another wavy line over here. Right below it. And they don't have to match. They don't have to have the same amount of bumps. And I'm going to do one more wavy line. But this one I'm going to give it a little more space. So here's another wavy line for my hills. And that could also be water. If you rather do the ocean there, that could be water as well. So this could be hills or it could be water. And that's going to be my middle ground. Now for my background, I'm going to do some mountains. You can make them pointy like this. Or you can make them rounded like this. And you go from one mountain and make the next one. From one mountain and make the next one. And like I said, if you want to make them pointy, you could do that too. And there's my mountains. And right behind my mountains right here, the sun is coming out. And if your circle's not perfect, that is okay. And now from my sun, I'm going to make some lines straight up to the edge of my paper. Right here, like this. And remember, with overlapping, some of those rays of sun might be coming out from behind the mountains, right? So they might be coming out from behind the mountains because they're overlapping with the mountains. And some other ones over here. And there is my background. So I have my flowers in the foreground or in the front. My hills or water in the middle ground, my mountains and sun in the background. That's right. Now to make my landscape more interesting, I might add some patterns into my hills and also into my sun. So my middle ground and my background will both have patterns, just like I did in my flowers. Remember, the flowers are in the foreground or front. The hills are in the middle ground or middle, and the mountains and the sun are in the background or back. Let's see, what kind of patterns am I going to do on my hills? Maybe on my hills I'm going to do kind of like a leaf pattern. Maybe it makes it look like there is plants planted all along the back hill. And they don't have to be big. So I'm doing 3 leaves. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. You make them a little bigger or a little smaller, that's fine. And so that's the pattern that I did on that part of my middle ground. If you want to make it even more interesting, you can add more things to your pattern. Maybe there's some rocks there. If you can imagine a different kind of pattern, you could do that also. Maybe for my next set of patterns, I could do wavy lines. Maybe these are fields where there's crops planted. And try to make your lines touch the top line and touch the bottom line. So have them go all the way from the top line to the bottom line. Or either way, if you're more comfortable doing them from bottom to top, that's okay too. All right, I got some cool patterns back there. And if it was water, you might want to add a pattern to it as well. Now I'm going to add some patterns to my mountains. Maybe this background is maybe going to have a line pattern like this all along the edge. Let's see what that's going to look like. There, it has the lines. I wonder what kind of patterns I could do on the edge of the other mountains. This one has circles. The other one has a zigzag line. The next one has a curly line. And the last one has a dotted line. You can use your own patterns or make up some of these mixed together however you want. Now we're going to work on the rays of the sun. And on the rays of the sun, you can add some patterns if you want to, or you can leave them just the way they are. I like to make it interesting, so I'm going to add some patterns. Let's see, in this one I'm going to add a zigzag line. And it comes right out of the page. On my next one, I'm going to skip one and leave one empty. And on my next one, I'm going to add a bouncy line. The bunny bouncing. Let's see. And then on my, remember I'm skipping every other one like a pattern. On my next one, I'm going to do stripes. Wow, that's turning out to be an excellent landscape. And if you can't think of what pattern to use, you could always repeat a pattern. I'm going to do the bouncy line again, and this time I'm going to do it on both sides of this ray of sun. Then maybe for my next one, I'm just going to do some dots. And remember, I'm doing every other one, so I'm leaving one empty, one with a pattern, one empty, one with a pattern. And then on my last one over here, I'm going to do spirals. Sorry. There we go. I'm going to do spirals. And spirals, you can't do them too fast because they will not look like spirals. You could always combine two patterns, like you could have spirals and dots together. Alright, and there I have my patterns and my rays of sun. If you want to do a pattern in your sun, you could do that as well too. I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to add some lines in the sun like this. And maybe some of them have the dots and some of them don't. Wow, that's a whole lot of patterns in my landscape. I have my foreground, nice and big, my middle ground in a medium size, and my background smaller. You're always going to have your foreground at the bottom of your paper, your middle ground in the middle of your paper, and your background in the back. Now that my picture is ready to get some color, I have to start thinking about what colors am I going to use. I would love for this to be colorful. And remember, if you're going to color an area that has a pattern, you should color it in a pattern. If I'm going to color this part with the wavy lines and I'm creating patterns, do I color it all one color? No, I cannot color all of this blue or all of this green. I have to use patterns. I have to use different colors. So make sure you use colorful, bright patterns. Let's get started with some color. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's art class where we made a landscape. I hope you remember foreground is in the front, middle ground is in the middle, and background is in the back. And remember, make it an Earth Day every day.